Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, once again hosting a business communication expert so that you and I can learn tips and strategies that will boost our business. Today, I'm delighted to host Al Smith. Al, based in the Atlanta metropolitan area, has been at the executive level for 7 companies in 5 industries and at all levels of sales. He has been a sales trainer and a career counselor for more than 10 years. He's also the author of 2 Amazon best-selling books, including his current and #1 bestseller in 2 categories, Hired: Every Employment Method. So I know that you'll want to join me in welcoming Al Smith. Hi, Al.
How are you?
I'm doing great. So happy to have you as my guest today.
Great to be here.
And what I want to begin with is you have had a long and stellar career in helping people in their career advancement, whether it's moving up the ladder or getting back into the workforce. And so the question that comes to mind is, what prompted you in this direction? What was it that gave us Al Smith, the hired guy?
I happen to have been I've won more awards than I have fingers and toes for, and I found myself out of a job. And I was doing all the things that made me successful at finding jobs in the past, and none of it was working. So I ended up digging myself a psychological hole that was unscalable. I was drug kicking and screaming to a job networking event. And in my mind, the only people that went to these things were low life, unemployed pond scum. Wait, what were you at the time? Never mind.
You didn't think it could do anything for you?
Absolutely not. I just knew that they were, people that were unprofessional. How could I not get a job? That's what I was thinking. And I got to this place, Roswell United Methodist Church's largest job networking event in the country. And I looked around this dining hall and I saw approximately 300 rather people that looked like you, and people that looked like me, and people that looked like the rest of your audience. And I was dumbfounded.
They looked like professional people.
They were all professional people, just like us. And they were in the same boat that I was in. And I was so dumbstruck by what I saw that the next morning I went to the RUMC website. Somehow
RUMC, Roswell United Methodist Church, Roswell, yes. Georgia.
Yes. And we have virtual meetings at this point, and anybody throughout the world can attend on the 2nd and 4th Mondays. But I stumbled onto the prayer request page, and I'm a very private person. I don't read people's prayer requests. But I read 4 that morning, and one guy changed my life forever. He said, I've lost my job. I'm virtually penniless. My wife has left me. My house is about to be foreclosed on, and I'm in total despair.
Can't get much worse than that.
No. And I recognized what he was capable of doing to himself, because I'd not only contemplated it, I picked a spot in the woods behind my house where it was going to all end.
You were that desperate.
I was that desperate because I was Al Smith. I was the man. I won all the awards, and I couldn't find a job, couldn't get an interview. So I didn't want anybody to be in that position if I could help stop it. So I became as obsessed with finding out what was working and why the things that I used to do that were successful in the past, why they didn't any longer work and what was working. And I discovered things like applicant tracking system software packages. And I found something called LinkedIn. And I found optimization, keyword optimization, and how artificial intelligence works.
So technology became a very important part of what you were learning and also the service that you offer still.
Absolutely. And I started volunteering, helping people get jobs, helping them fill the emotional hole that I was in.
That's one question I wanted to ask you as well. And I didn't know, of course, about your background and how low you had gotten in your feelings and you'd lost all optimism and life didn't even seem worth living anymore. So you deal with people like that when they come to you now for counseling and career guidance. So how do you help them get out of that terrible pit of despair, feeling so useless, feeling like there's no future? What do you do to help them out of that, Al?
You have value. You've only lost your job. You brought value to previous companies. You're going to bring value to future companies, plural, because chances are good you're going to have more than one more job in your lifetime, no matter what your age is. You have to understand that you bring value. You're going to be of value to your next company. You are of value to your fellow neighbor. You may not get a job as soon as you want to, but you will get a job. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And you must stay with that. Never be around, if you're ever around anybody negative, politely excuse yourself and get the hell away from them, because you can't afford to be around anybody as negative as I was, because they'll drag you down. Be around positives. As a matter of fact, I would like people to spend more time at business to business meetings than at job networking meetings. I know that sounds like sacrilege, but you can be around negativity at a lot of job networking meetings. But if you're around people who have jobs, chances are good they know where a job is.
And it's interesting, and you and I have observed it as other people have across many years. Moods and attitudes are as contagious and as deadly as the virus that we've been talking about for 18 months now.
Absolutely. I half jokingly say that when I lost my last job, the first three things I did was go home and yell at my wife, kick the dog, and dive into a bottle of booze. Well, I don't have a dog. So, but the other two, unfortunately, were true.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember, and this was before the COVID experience, but I guess it was during the downturn of 2010. I remember being in a restaurant and I looked over at the bar. This was at lunch. I looked over at the bar. It was full of guys sitting there. And I said to the server, "What's going on here?" And the server answered, "These same guys are here every day. They're drowning their sorrows. They're commiserating with each other. They're talking about how bad, how terrible things are and how hopeless they are." And it's
Digging a
very
hole.
much like Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you can't, you're right.
You're right, absolutely right. You can or you can't.
So attitude certainly is one item that you help with. And along that line, Al, I'm sure that some of the people who come to you say, "Well, I lost my job. I realize what you say, Al, that I still have value, but my skills are not transferable." My guess is you've heard that over and over. What do you say to clients who come to you with that type of approach?
Well, let's look at it two different ways. If you're looking to stay in the same arena that you have been in, let's talk about your skills. And if you're in job transition looking to do the same thing, we can update those skills. You can take little quick certification courses on LinkedIn. You can sit through classes. But let's say you want to transfer to something else, from this to that. Well, let's look at some job descriptions. What are they looking for here? I bet you did a lot of that there. And you might have to translate from this terminology to that terminology, but the chances are really good that you're bringing lots and lots of transferable skills that you just don't recognize that you're bringing. Let's discuss this. What have you done there that you can bring to here? You have assets, you have value, you're going to bring those to your next position.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, something else that many people face, and it's not acknowledged by companies, but there's the factor of age discrimination. It would be absolutely naive to say that that doesn't exist. And many executives that you deal with have gotten to their executive positions early to mid 50s. They've stayed there, and all of a sudden, they don't have that anymore, and they're in the job search. And how do they present themselves in such a way that they convince a potential employer, I've still got vitality, I've still got energy, I've still got creativity? How do you go about that with the mail?
There was when I was researching for my current book, Hired Every Employment Method, I I knew I needed to base or use some of the energy there to show the things that older folks like myself have and bring to the table. And there are preconceived notions of the things that we lack. So like we lack energy. So you need to show that you are vibrant and you're keeping up with the times, that you're healthy. These are all things that are perceptions that we lack. So you need to show enthusiasm. You need to demonstrate your value.
For
And
example, maybe uh, drop the word in that I do an hour exercise every day, or I'm a jogger, or I'm a bicycler, or I go to the gym. Even comments like that let people know that you've got physical vitality.
and keeping up with the times as well. So your interviewer, and actually, I would like for everybody to stop thinking of interviews. I want you to think of conversations.
That's great. That's great.
You're never going to have an interview with your boss after you're hired. You're going to have conversations with them. So imagine having a conversation with your future employer, and they mention something, and you can take a piece of that and say, it's funny you mentioned that. I found an article on that very subject last week. Would you like for me to send you a bit link? Bitly, which is you take the great big long URL, go to Bitly, and it shortens
like
it.
a tiny URL.
Exactly. And just by using terms like that, it plants the seed that you're keeping up with the times and that you're not the way that they perceive you. Now, at the same time that there is age discrimination for older workers, there's age discrimination against younger workers
because they don't have the experience.
They don't have the experience. They're perceived to have more ability or they lack the loyalty that we have. So if I know the biases against an age group, I can come up with tactics to overcome those biases, whether it's an older worker or a younger worker. And I devoted 2 subchapters in my book, one for younger workers, which I call baby elephants, because there's an 800-pound, the great big elephant in the room that's going to stampede. And then one that I called Tuscus elongatus, for those of us who are long in the tooth. I like to joke.
I think I just want to underscore what you're talking about, having a conversation in an interview. The worst interview, and I was in management for 20 years. So I went through interviews as I was seeking different positions elsewhere. And I also hosted many interviews. And the interviewee who comes in, and I know that they are following a script. They've memorized it, they've practiced it, and they're not going to deviate from it, no matter what my questions are. This person comes across to me as totally inflexible,
Yes.
Someone who's just not going to relate very well to others because they're tied exactly to what was pre-planned. And that's what I tell people about these interviews, Al. I say they're planned, but they're not canned. And the main thing, well, not the main thing, certainly qualifications are high on the list, but one of the main things an employer wants is a real person, right?
Yes. Yes. I tell the story of an interview I had. It was the first company I ever worked for in the pharmaceutical industry. Go to the hotel. We interviewed in hotels back then. And found the room, knocked on the door. Mike opens the door. He says, "You see this brass thing on the door?" "Yeah." If you knew that it was a doorbell and rang it, you could have had the job without interviewing. I said, excuse me for a second. I slammed the door in his face and started beating the hell out of the doorbell. And I could hear him laugh on the other side of the door. So if you can break the ice some way, you want to be human and you want to have a conversation, move away from confrontation and into conversation. You want to converse with your employer. And you want to do that, get that feel when you're doing interviewing to fill in a spot. You need to have that conversation, get a feel for it, because the fit has to be right for both of us, or it's right for neither of us. And as a matter of fact, as we make nice a little bit in the beginning of the conversation, I like to ask questions from the beginning. Do you mind if I ask a question before we get started? Nobody ever says no. Hopefully you've had the chance to look at my resume. What is it about my background that made you want to speak with me? Asking open-ended questions, you elicit more information, and the more they talk, the smarter you become.
That's exactly right.
If I'd ever shut up, you'd think I was brilliant.
And another thing, Al, that I always did as a job applicant, if I got to a potential employer's office and the administrative assistant would say, would you like to wait out here? He or she's not in the office yet, or go into their office. Of course I go into their office. I look for golf trophies. I look for pictures of their children. I look for a diploma for their alma mater. And when they come in, I've got, you talked about breaking icebreakers. That's one of the strongest icebreakers of all, because you're showing interest in them individually.
Absolutely. The walls talk. The New York detectives were brought to the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they would stand in front of a picture, then have to turn away and describe what was in the picture. Be observant. You learn so much. Ask open-ended questions. You learn even more. And plant the seed. Use assumptive closes when you're talking. But what are you going to want me to focus on in the first 30, 60, and 90 days after I get started?
Excellent.
Assumptive close.
Al, these have been very strong contributions to all of us who want to advance our careers, whether it's a new job or whether it's moving up in our current company. I so appreciate your being here. I know that our viewers and our podcast listeners welcome this wonderful information. So tell us, please, your contact information, including how to get your latest book.
Sure. If you're looking for me on LinkedIn, don't look for Al Smith. Just type in the hired guy. You'll get.
There are a few Al Smiths around.
There are one or two. I ran for president in 1928, and I lost to Herbert Hoover. You could look it up. As a matter of fact, my book, I had to use Alfred M. Smith, because if you type Alfred Smith or Al Smith, you get the guy that ran for president in 1928. If you want to give me a call, 770-594-8756 is my landline. 770-355-1776. Very patriotic is my cell number. And my email address is this. You're going to hate this one. A as in Al, A Marshall, which is my middle name, MARSHALL Smith, A Marshall Smith @gmail.com.
Thank you. And I know people will want to contact you and get your book, Hired Guy. My gosh, great. And since you've given your contact information, I'm delighted to give mine, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and leaders, and give me a call. We'll discuss your communication problems and challenges and how I can help you find solutions to them. Al, it's time for us to go, but any closing thought?
Keep positive. You will get hired. You will get a job. It may not be as soon as you want, but it will happen.
Thank you so much. A message that many, many thousands of people need, and many thousands of people need exactly what you're offering, Al. I commend you for your own professional comeback and for helping others do the same. Thanks again to Al Smith for being a terrific guest today. Thanks to those of you who joined us on the YouTube version or on the podcast on iTunes, the Biz Communication Show. And I invite you to be with us again next week for another stimulating, valuable, and informative interview. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy.